The bottle of cheap whiskey shattered against the pristine Italian marble of the lobby floor, the sound exploding like a gunshot in a cathedral. The smell of stale alcohol and desperation instantly defiled the air, clashing violently with the building's signature scent of white tea and money. It was 2:14 a.m. Min-jun didn't flinch at the noise. He didn't flinch at anything anymore. At 32, he had built an empire on the bones of men who thought they were tougher than him. He walked through the automatic glass doors of the Hanul Tower, flanked by two men who moved like shadows. He was impeccably dressed in a charcoal three-piece suit that cost more than the average citizen earned in a year, his silk tie perfectly knotted, his expression bored. He had just come from a negotiation that involved bolt cutters and a very stubborn rival. A drunk man screaming in his lobby was barely a blip on his radar. Until he saw her. Zuri stood behind the concierge desk, her spine steel straight despite the tremor in her hands. She was beautiful in a way that made the sterile luxury of the lobby look artificial, deep mahogany skin that glowed under the recessed lighting, high cheekbones, and dark, intelligent eyes that were currently wide with humiliation. She wore the building's uniform, a slate gray blazer and skirt, but she wore it with a dignity that the man screaming at her was trying to strip away. "I know you're in there, Zuri. You think you're better than me? You answer my texts." The man, Marcus, swayed, knocking over a crystal vase of orchids. Water pooled on the floor, mixing with the whiskey. Zuri stepped out from behind the desk, her voice trembling but clear. "Marcus, please. You have to leave. You're causing a scene." "A scene?" Marcus laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "I'll show you a scene. You think because you work in a palace now, you can forget where you came from?" He lunged. "Drop anxious face with sweat if you've ever had an ex show up at your job trying to ruin the new life you built." Zuri flinched, raising her hands to protect her face, a reflex born of memory, not instinct. But the blow never landed. Min-jun didn't run. He didn't shout. He simply stopped walking. The air in the massive lobby seemed to drop 20 degrees. His presence was a physical weight, a gravitational pull that sucked the oxygen out of the room. Sang-woo, his head of security, moved before Min-jun even gave the signal. One moment Marcus was lunging, the next, he was face down on the wet marble, his arm twisted at an angle that made a sickening pop. Marcus screamed. Min-jun walked forward, his Italian leather shoes making no sound on the stone. He stopped inches from the puddle of whiskey and water, looking down at the thrashing man with the dispassionate curiosity of a scientist examining a bug. Then, he looked at Zuri. "Is this?" Min-jun's voice was low, a rich baritone wrapped in velvet and barbed wire. "Yours?" Zuri looked from the man on the floor to the man who looked like a god of war in a suit. Her chest heaved. "He's my ex. I'm so sorry, sir." I tried to be quiet. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. Min-jun stepped over Marcus and closed the distance to Zuri. He reached out, and she flinched again. His eyes, dark and cold as the Han River at night, narrowed. He didn't touch her. Instead, he reached past her and plucked a shard of glass from her hair. "Sang-woo," Min-jun said, never breaking eye contact with Zuri. "Na, Sejangnam," the security chief replied from the floor. "Take the trash out." Min-jun dropped the glass shard. It chimed against the desk. "And ensure it doesn't find its way back." The silence that followed was deafening. Zuri watched as two more guards appeared from nowhere, lifting Marcus like he was a bag of laundry. They didn't drag him out the front door. They took him toward the service elevators. Marcus was sobbing now, his bravado dissolved by pain and the terrifying realization that he had walked into a predator's den. Zuri's knees gave out. She gripped the edge of the marble desk, her knuckles turning lighter shades of brown. I'll clean this up immediately, sir. I'll call maintenance. I'm so sorry. I know this is grounds for termination." She was already calculating. Rent was due in 4 days. Her student loan payment was overdue. If she lost this job, she was back to the diner, back to the double shifts that made her feet bleed. Min-jun watched her. He saw the panic fluttering in her throat. He saw the way her eyes darted to the service elevator, terrified for the man who had just tried to hurt her. "Why?" he asked. Zuri blinked, confused. "Sir? Why apologize for the storm?" Min-jun tilted his head. "You did not break the bottle. You did not disturb my peace. He was here for me. That makes it my fault." "That makes it your burden," he corrected. "Not your fault." He took a step closer. He smelled of sandalwood, expensive scotch, and something metallic, like rain on a gun barrel. He looked at her hands, still gripping the desk. "You are shaking." "I'm fine," she lied. "You are a terrible liar." He reached into his breast pocket and produced a handkerchief. It was white silk, monogrammed with gray thread. He held it out. "Wipe your face. You have mascara on your cheek." Zuri hesitated. Taking it felt like a transaction she couldn't afford. But his gaze was relentless. She took the silk. It was soft, cool against her heated skin. "Go home," Min-jun said. "I can't. My shift ends at 6. Your shift ends when I say it ends. Go home. A car is waiting. I take the bus." Min-jun's jaw clenched, a small ripple of muscle in a face of stone. "Not tonight. Not ever again." He turned and walked toward the private elevator bank, the doors sliding open before he even pressed a button. He didn't look back. Zuri stood alone in the wreckage of the lobby, clutching a silk handkerchief that cost more than her rent, listening to the hum of the elevator taking the most dangerous man in Seoul up to the penthouse. She thought she'd never see him again. She was wrong. Over the next 3 days, Zuri's life dissolved into a surreal dream. When she arrived for her next shift, she was stopped by the building manager. She braced herself for the firing squad. Instead, she was handed a key card. Black matte plastic. No logo. "Top floor," the manager said, refusing to meet her eyes. "Mr. Kim requested you personally. You're on his administrative staff now." I don't have administrative experience," Zuri stammered. "He didn't ask for your resume. He asked for you." The elevator ride to the penthouse took 40 seconds. Zuri counted them to keep from hyperventilating. When the doors opened, she wasn't stepping into an office. She was stepping into a fortress. Floor-to-ceiling glass revealed the entire city of Seoul spread out like a circuit board of gold and neon. The furniture was sparse, modern, dark leather and chrome. It was beautiful, cold, and silent. Min-jun was standing by the window, looking out at the city he conquered daily. He wore a white dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that were corded with muscle. "You came," he said, turning. "Did I have a choice?" Zuri asked, clutching her purse. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "There is always a choice. Most people just choose the path of least resistance." "And what path is this?" "The path of safety." He gestured to a chair. "Sit." She sat. He poured tea from a porcelain pot, traditional, delicate, at odds with the modern steel of the room. He placed the cup in front of her. "Marcus," he said. The name sounded like a curse in his mouth. "He has significant gambling debts. That is why he came to you. He thought you had access to the building's petty cash." Zuri felt the blood drain from her face. "How do you know that?" "I know everything that enters my building. Especially the pests." He took a sip of his tea. "His debt has been reassigned." "Reassigned?" "To me." Zuri stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I didn't ask you to do that. I can't pay you back. I have nothing you want." Min-jun looked up at her, his eyes dark pools of unreadable intent. You have no idea what I want. I'm not selling myself, she snapped, her voice rising. If that's what this job is, sit down, he commanded. Softly. Lethally. Zuri froze. I do not buy women, Minjun said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. And I do not exploit desperation. The debt is absorbed. It is a rounding error in my accounts. He will not bother you again because he knows who holds his leash now. Why? Zuri whispered. Why would you do that for a stranger? He stood then, moving around the desk with a predator's grace. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face, before he tucked a loose coil of her hair behind her ear. His fingers grazed her skin, a touch so light it felt like a burn. Because, he murmured, when he raised his hand to you, you did not scream. You flinched, but you did not run. You stood your ground. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I respect strength, Zuri. And I protect what I respect. Type Team Minjun if you'd let the secret Korean Sejangnam who owns your building protect you from your dangerous ex. For the next 2 weeks, he integrated her into his world. She wasn't a secretary, she was a witness. She organized his schedule, yes, but she also sat in the corner during meetings with men who had scars on their faces and guns under their jackets. She saw the way Minjun commanded the room without raising his voice. She saw the empire. And she saw the man beneath it. She saw him staring at a photo of an elderly woman in a hanbok on his desk. She saw him rub his temples when the migraines hit. She saw the loneliness that echoed in the vast, empty penthouse. One rainy Tuesday, he drove her home. Not a driver. Him. The interior of his black SUV smelled of leather and rain. The city blurred past the tinted windows. You live in a dangerous neighborhood, he noted, frowning at the graffiti on her building. It's what I can afford. Not anymore. Minjun, she had started using his name. He insisted. I worry, he admitted, staring straight ahead at the wet asphalt. I sit in my tower, and I worry about you down here. I can take care of myself. I've been doing it for a long time. You shouldn't have to. He turned to her, the car idling at the curb. The streetlights cast shadows across his sharp jawline. I think about what it would feel like to have the right to protect you, to be someone you could depend on instead of someone you have to survive. The air in the car grew thick, charged with an electricity that made Zuri's skin prickle. He leaned in, just an inch. Her breath hitched. Zuri didn't invite him up. But she wanted to. God, she wanted to. The tension between them stretched taut, a rubber band ready to snap. But then, the world snapped first. 3 days later, Zuri was organizing files in the penthouse when she knocked over a stack of folders. Papers sprawled across the floor. She knelt to gather them, and a photograph slid out from a red dossier. It was her. Walking to the bus stop. Buying groceries. Sleeping on the bus. Photos taken weeks ago. Before the incident in the lobby. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She flipped through the file. Background checks. Financial records. Her mother's medical history. You found it. Minjun's voice came from the doorway. He wasn't wearing his jacket. His tie was undone, hanging loose around his neck. He looked exhausted, and for the first time, dangerous in a way that was directed at her. Zuri scrambled back, clutching the file. You've been stalking me? Watching, he corrected. He walked into the room, closing the door behind him. The click of the latch sounded like a prison cell locking. Since when? Since the day I bought this building. I saw you on the security feeds. You worked harder than anyone else. You smiled at the tenants who treated you like furniture. So you, what? Obsessed over me? I investigated. In my world, You do not approach something valuable without knowing its history. I'm not a thing, Min-jun. I'm not a building you can acquire. I know. He stopped a few feet away. You are the only real thing in my life. Everything else is a transaction. A lie. A maneuver. He gestured to the window, to the city below. They call me a CEO. You know what I am. I am a criminal, Zuri. I traffic in influence and violence. My hands are not clean. They will never be clean. He looked at his hands, then at her. I tried to stay away. I watched from a distance. But then that idiot came into my lobby and threatened you, and I realized. His voice cracked, the cold facade shattering. I realized that if I did not claim you, the world would break you. And I would burn this city to ash before I let that happen. Zuri stared at him. She should be terrified. This was a confession of madness. But she looked at the man who had kept her ex away, who had given her a job, who had driven her home and refused to touch her without permission. You're a monster, she whispered. Yes, he agreed. But I am your monster. If you let me be. She stood up, the file dropping from her hands. She walked toward him. He tensed, as if expecting a slap. Instead, she placed her hand on his chest, over his heart. It was beating fast, a frantic rhythm that betrayed his calm face. I don't need a savior, Min-jun, she said softly. But I am tired of fighting alone. He covered her hand with his own. His skin was hot. You will never fight alone again. I swear it. He lowered his head, his forehead resting against hers. Sarangi, he breathed, the Korean word for love slipping out like a secret. I didn't know I could feel this until you. Would you risk everything for a man who watched you from the shadows, knowing he's a dangerous criminal who would burn the city to keep you safe? The peace lasted exactly 48 hours. They were leaving the building. It was late. Min-jun held her hand openly now, interlacing his fingers with hers. He was walking her to the car, Sangwoo flanking them. I want to take you to Jeju this weekend, Min-jun was saying. My Halmiani has a house there. She would like you. Your grandmother? Zuri laughed. The matriarch of a crime family? I think she'd eat me alive. She will respect you. You have fire. The shot didn't sound like a bang. It sounded like a crack of thunder. Min-jun jerked violently. Get down. Sangwoo screamed, shoving Zuri toward the concrete pillar. Chaos erupted. The pristine garage turned into a war zone. Glass shattered. Tires screeched. Zuri was on the ground, scraping her knees. She looked up. Min-jun was still standing, but he was swaying. A dark stain was spreading across the white shirt, just above his hip. Min-jun, she screamed. He turned to her, his face pale, eyes wide with shock. Not because he was shot. But because he had failed to prevent this. Stay down, he roared, pulling a gun from a holster she hadn't even known he was wearing. He fired back, 3 controlled shots into the darkness. A body fell from behind a parked van. It wasn't a professional hitman. It was Marcus. Marcus, holding a cheap pistol, looking wild-eyed and terrified, manipulated by someone bigger, someone who knew Min-jun's weakness. You ruined my life. Marcus screamed, raising the gun again. Min-jun didn't hesitate. He didn't negotiate. He raised his weapon and ended the threat. Permanently. Then his legs gave out. Zuri scrambled over to him, ignoring the shouting of security, ignoring the blood. She pressed her hands against his side. The blood was hot, sticky, terrifyingly real. Min-jun, look at me. Look at me. His eyes were fluttering shut. He reached up, his bloody hand cupping her cheek, leaving a smear of red on her dark skin. Zuri, he rasped. You're safe. I promised. Don't you dare, she sobbed, tears cutting tracks through the blood on her face. "Don't you dare leave me." "Sangwoo," Minjun wheezed. "I'm here, Sejangnam," the security chief said, his voice breaking. "Take her to the safe house." Protocol 0. "No." Zuri screamed. "I'm going with you to the hospital." "Too dangerous," Minjun whispered. His eyes focused on her one last time. "I will come back to you. I always repay my debts." His hand fell from her face. Sangwoo grabbed Zuri, pulling her away as the paramedics arrived. She fought him, kicking and screaming, watching as they loaded Minjun onto a stretcher. The last thing she saw was his stillness. 3 days. That's how long she waited in the safe house. It was a villa in the mountains, surrounded by high walls and men with assault rifles. It was luxurious. It was a prison. Zuri didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She paced the marble floors until her feet ached. Every time the phone rang, she stopped breathing. Protocol 0 meant total lockdown. No news. No contact. She replayed the moment in the garage 1,000 times. The way he had stood in front of her. The way he had taken a bullet meant for her. The way Marcus had been used as a pawn by a rival gang, the Golden Dragons, to get to Minjun. On the 4th morning, the front door opened. Zuri was in the kitchen, staring at a cup of cold coffee. She froze. Footsteps. Heavy. Slow. She turned. Minjun stood in the archway. He looked like hell. His skin was gray, his arm was in a sling, and he was leaning heavily on a cane. But he was upright. He was breathing. "Minjun," she breathed. He looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was replaced by a raw, burning hunger. "I told you," he said, his voice rough, "I would come back." Zuri crossed the room in a blur. She didn't care about his injuries. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in the crook of his good shoulder. He hissed in pain but wrapped his good arm around her waist, holding her so tight it bruised. "You idiot," she sobbed into his shirt. "You absolute idiot." "I am alive," he murmured into her hair, inhaling her scent like it was oxygen. "The Golden Dragons are not. It is finished." He pulled back to look at her. He wiped the tears from her face with his thumb. "I restructured everything," he said quietly. "While I was in the hospital. I am liquidating the illegal assets. I am stepping down from the shadows. It will take time, and it will be dangerous, but I cannot have this life and have you." "You're giving it up?" Zuri asked, stunned. "The Empire?" "The Empire is ash," he said. "You are the only thing that matters." "I told you, Zuri. I protect what is mine." He kissed her then. It wasn't gentle. It was a claim. It was a promise sealed in blood and survival. It tasted of antiseptic and relief. 6 months later. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of the penthouse. The space was different now. There were plants. There were colorful throw pillows. There was life. Zuri stood in the kitchen, humming as she made coffee. She wore one of Minjun's shirts, which hung to her knees. A pair of arms wrapped around her waist from behind. Minjun rested his chin on her shoulder. The scar on his side was still pink, a permanent reminder of the night the world almost ended. "You are up early," he murmured, kissing the spot behind her ear. "I have a meeting with the gallery owner today," she said, leaning back into him. "Someone has to work." Minjun chuckled. The sound rumbled against her back. "I work. I am a legitimate consultant now. Very boring. Very safe." "I like boring," she said, turning in his arms. He looked down at her, his eyes soft, stripped of the cold steel that had defined him for so long. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Zuri stopped breathing. "I have been waiting for the right moment," he said. but I realized there are no right moments. Only moments we steal. He opened the box. A diamond, classic and flawless, sat inside. Zuri, he said, you saved me from a life of gray. Will you let me spend the rest of mine making sure yours is full of color? She looked at the ring, then at the man who had walked through fire to get back to her. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Sejangnam. He laughed, slipping the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. That, he whispered against her lips, is the best investment of my life. As he kissed her, the morning light flooding their home, Zuri knew with certainty, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And so was she. Comment where you're watching from. See you in the next story.